Welcome to the Virtual Christian Show. My name is G, and today I'll be talking about one of the most common questions for Christians, and many Christians ask: where is God in suffering? So today we have a commentary comments by Dr. John Lennox, a famous apologist, and I believe he answers this question philosophically and biblically about where God is in our suffering. So let's watch the video.
So let me come to the heart of this as I see it. And you can think about this. I've no simplistic solutions. I wouldn't insult you by having a simplistic solution. But my approach to it, in a way, is this: that I'm faced with beauty, as I said, and the wonderful potentiality and capacity of medicine to effect a cure. Now, I sit here, and I'm sitting in this room because of medical intervention at the last second of my life. So I know what that means. A cardiac surgeon saved my life, and I wasn't expected to live, no hope whatsoever. So I'm sitting here. And people say, well, thank God for that. I said, be careful. Because in the very same few weeks that happened to me, my sister's daughter of 22 was carried away by a massive brain tumor, and she didn't get cured. Now, how do I cope with that? Well, I see it like this. If you reject God, I'll understand you, to a sense, because you just say there isn't a God, forget it. The universe is like it is, it's bleak. For some people it goes well, but for the vast majority it's pretty horrible. And certainly for the vast majority of people who've ever lived. But there the suffering remains. And now that little boy who's got this disease that's going to kill him in a few weeks, nothing, the end, nothing. Atheism has nothing to say to him that's positive. Now, what can I say to the young mother of cancer that's going to die in a few weeks? I can't cure her cancer, it's inoperable, and so on. But you see, let me put it this way. You know, probably, many of you, that at the heart of Christianity there is a cross.
So before I let John Lennox continue talking about the cross, I think the issue that he's trying to address is that some people are healed, some people are relieved of their suffering, but yet other people suffer, and that is true. If you see in our everyday life, people suffer, and not only that, some people do get healed, and then we can ask ourselves why this person is healed or why this person is not healed. I'll address that in the summary later. So in 2 Corinthians 12 it says, this is written by the Apostle Paul, and the Apostle Paul says, unless I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, an illness was given to Apostle Paul, a messenger of Satan to buffet him, lest he be exalted above measure. Concerning these things he pleaded, the Apostle Paul pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from him, and God said to him that my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. So even the Apostle Paul was not healed. This is an example that the Apostle Paul suffered in a certain way. The Apostle Paul was a person that was the first missionary, if not the best missionary that ever lived, because he was powered by God, but yet he still suffered from certain things. But if you read the Gospels, you read Acts, it says so many things that in Acts 3 says, then Peter said, silver and gold I do not have, but what I give to you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. And the man walked. The man asked for money, but Peter said, rise up, take your bed and walk. And what happened was that the man started to walk again. So there are in fact in scriptures there are people that are healed, but there are people that are not healed as well. We don't know why, and we can't really answer this question, but I'll address it even deeper below. And now John Lennox will be talking about the cross, Jesus in regards to Christianity, and how it relates to suffering.
And since I can't solve the philosophical problem why a good God allows this level of suffering, I ask another question, and I asked it before in my talk. Now I'm going to come to how I reflect on it. And that is, granted that it's messy, granted, let me put it this way, this world is full of 2 things, beauty and barbed wire. Is there any evidence anywhere that there is a God you could trust with it ultimately. Now, the heart, and the main reason I'm a Christian, is because the heart of Christianity, there's a cross. And on it, Jesus died, as you know. But the big thing is that he claimed to be God. God encoded in humanity. Do I believe it? Yes, I do. As a scientist, yes, I do. But that's another story. So the question in this context is, what is God doing on a cross? And my answer to that is, it shows me at the very least that God has not remained distant from the problem of human suffering, but has himself become part of it. Now, at the pragmatic level, I've seen that bring healing to many, many people. If they begin to see that God actually understands our suffering. You know, often when you're standing along somebody who's suffering, you'll know as doctors that if they're weeping and you weep too, you have far bigger effect than if you take out a stethoscope and give them more antibiotics, because they're looking for somebody that understands. Now you see, ladies and gentlemen, let me go one step further. If that was the end of it, it would be nothing. But the God that suffered on the cross rose from the dead, and that opens up a whole world of possibility.
So I believe that this is an extremely beautiful argument that John Lennox puts out. What he is trying to say that is that the context of asking about in suffering, how do we think, or what do we do as Christians? We need to understand that in the heart of Christianity there is a cross, and God has graciously come into our suffering. In 1 Corinthians 1 chapter 1 verse 18 says, "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God." And that is because in the abundance, in the suffering of Christ, it is also known as the fact that we can find comfort through him. And in Romans 15 it says, "May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you the same attitude of mind towards each other that Christ had." The reason why we accept Christianity, because it is the truth, but in the truth we also know that God, Jesus, understands us because he bore his sufferings on the cross, and there's a promise of comfort for us there. And now let's continue with the video.
It opens up at the level of moral evil, not only the possibility, but to my mind the certainty that there's going to be a final judgment, that terrorists are not going to get away with it, that the bombers of 9/11 are going to face it. That is what backs up your conscience and tells me that it's not an illusion, that morality is not an illusion because it's got a backup. But secondly, I do believe as I sit here that God is a God of compensation. Does I think of that little boy and think of my own grandchildren and think of children I have known who have suffered to death with these degenerative diseases. Now, this is a big thing to say, but I'm going to say it to you as medics. I believe firmly that if you could see what God has done with people like that ultimately, your questions would stop. That's what I believe. But it depends crucially on the fact that there's someone in space, time, and history who's suffered and risen from the dead. Atheism doesn't have that. It is nothing. And you see that 22-year-old niece of mine with her brain tumor, and I sat with her. She knew she was going to die. As she neared death, her confidence in God increased, because she knew where she was going. She had real hope. Now, I've watched atheists die, and they don't have that hope. And you see, that goes back, Michael, to your earlier point of those statistics. People who are secure tend to be less religious. But you see, a statistical analysis of a group of people who are secure at the moment, if you're sitting there feeling secure financially and you lose all your money tomorrow, you're not secure anymore. Or you lose your health tomorrow. That may be true at a given stage because life hasn't hit us in reality and we feel wonderful. We're like people sitting on a beach enjoying the sun, and somebody up on the cliff can see that the tide's coming in. It's all around us. We feel terrific. We feel secure. But actually we need saving desperately, although we don't see it. So that's how, sorry to take so long about that, but it's such a big thing. And it's not an answer in the sense of, oh, well, that's it, X plus Y equals Z, therefore we're all solved. No. But you see, for me, ladies and gentlemen, my Christian faith is not an abstract belief in a theory. It's a living relationship with a person. And it's that relationship that I take into all these engagements and talking to people. And I arrived in Christchurch, I'll finish with this, 2 days after the earthquake. I had to speak at the biggest church gathering I had in many years, and sitting in front of me were people who'd lost their husbands because a wall fell on them in their office, and people that felt guilty because the wall fell on their colleague and didn't fall on them. This awful, terrible mess. And I spoke along the lines I've spoken to you, and one of the most moving things to me was a letter I got from a lady who lost her husband. She said, I couldn't stay to see the people, but she said, I just want you to know that in what you said about Christ, the cross, and the resurrection, I see the first glimmer of hope.
Yep, so that's the end of the presentation by Dr. John Lennox. It's an amazing explanation, very philosophical but at the same time biblical. Let me address the last few points that he said. He said God suffered and understands us through Jesus. In 1 Peter it says, therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourself with the same attitude, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. It says that Christ suffered in his body as well, and he has revealed and let us know that he has suffered and understands our suffering, which is a God that's trying to empathize and understand us. And last thing that I believe John didn't talk about in his answer, and it's something that I always remember, is in Philippians 1:23. It says, for to me, this is what the Apostle Paul is saying, to live in Christ and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in this body, this would mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two sides. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. So the Christian life and the afterlife of a Christian tends to be awesome and great. Even Apostle Paul knows that in the afterlife is a greater hope, because we are able to meet with God and who he is. And let me end with a quick conclusion that to answer this question is that we are not God, and it's very difficult for us to answer every single question on why God does certain things. Like, why does God paint the sky blue? Why do kids give birth through parents? We cannot answer these things as we are not God. And it's important to note that in answering these questions that we can compare with the atheists, as the atheists have no hope in any form of God, but Christians can have a hope in a personal God that manifested himself through Jesus to show us that he understands and cares for us in our times of suffering. A great God would do this, but not all gods will definitely do these kind of things, and it's to remind us that in suffering there is love, in suffering there is God that can give us the strength to live this life. Yes, and that's it for the video. If you like the content like this, please subscribe and like to help me get this video out to more people that needs these questions and answers, and I'll break them down and educate you more about what is the Christian life through the Bible. Thank you and God bless.